So, this is the second session for this painting. Still kind of experimenting, trying to figure out how to get the live stream video quality up to par, I guess. So I've got a different angle that allows you to see my palette as well as some of the reference that I'm using. So hopefully this gives you a little bit clearer view of what I'm doing. So I haven't touched this palette since Friday when we were working on this before. So the first thing I'm going to do is some of these pigments, these paints have skinned over. So I'm just going to pick the skin off of it. Look, a little layer of paint that's dried on each one. So this might be a little bit boring for you, but oh well. So some of them don't skin over too much. So just going to tap each one to make sure there's. What I don't want is little bits of gooey, dried paint getting into my painting. So that's, you can just stab it with a paintbrush and get the paint if you're in a hurry, which I've done plenty of times, not necessarily because I'm in a hurry, but because I'm too lazy to do this. But I find if I take the extra time to do a little bit of prep work, then it saves me like just goobers in my painting later on. You know, that goes for keeping your thinners clean and your brushes clean. So I've already cleaned off my brushes, so you don't have to look at nothing right here while I'm off washing my brushes off. So alright, looks like everything's pretty good here. So now's a point where I'm going to think about doing some detail, but I'm still going to hammer into it. I'm not sure where I want to start, so what I might start doing is some of this pigment, some of this paint on the painting is kind of dried flat and some of it's shiny. So what I do is I take a little bit of my painting medium here, which is linseed oil and liquin, and I'm just going to brush some of that on there real quick. This makes the entire painting have sort of a even sheen to it, so whatever reflections are there, kind of even. Now I'm going to check my camera, my OBS settings here, make sure that I don't have the super big glare. I got a polarizing filter on this one, so let me make sure it's not glaring too bad. Alright, looks good. Alright. Doesn't look like we have glare, so that's good. This is kind of cramped in here. Alright. So, where to start? So I'm looking at my reference, I'm looking at my painting, and I'm just kind of seeing what's off here, and I can see that his forehead's off here a bit. Just kind of looking back and forth at them and seeing what jumps out at me here. Alright, so I'm going to take a angled brush. It's by Princeton, number 10 angled brush. I like these chisel brushes. You can do lots of different types of mark making with one brush. You can do a wide mark, you can do a thin mark, you can do like sort of sculptural carving type of marks with it. So that's one of my favorites. Okay, so I'm going to kind of just go at this a little heavy-handed, I think, because I find if I take an attitude of not caring, but not feeling like the painting is a precious thing that I have to keep from screwing up, or Like sometimes the bolder you become with something, the better. I'm not sure that's. And some of it takes a little bit of, like, this is a warm up part of it. You sit down to start working on something, you kind of gotta get back into the flow a bit. So that takes a bit of just noodling around a little bit. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna noodle around on this until things kind of feel like they're starting to click a little bit again. So, taking some Cadmium Red Light, some of this deep red right here back into that mixture. I was using Indigo Blue and raw Umber, which is a really dark, almost neutral blue and a warm brown. So that warmth and that coolness kind of cancels each other out a little bit. It's like mixing two complementary colors together. Like, so this is a little bit reddish and this is bluish. You know, blue is kind of close to green, so it's not really a complementary color, but it's, I don't know, it works for me. So I'm gonna go back into this, and it looks a little too warm. So that is too warm. So I'm gonna take some raw umber into that. I'm just gonna stick it straight in there. See what that does. I'm not sure that's an improvement. Alright, so let's come back with blue. This mixture here. Okay, so I'm starting to see that. I'm going to take a Cadmium Red Light and some of this blue. This will do the same thing as that. Cadmium Red Light's obviously a lot hotter than burnt umber here. So his cheek is way out here. I guess let's go ahead and just do that. He's got kind of a sad look on his face. His eyebrows are kind of up like that. So my reference is on a different computer than what you're looking at on the video, just because I don't have a way of hooking up my monitor that I'm working from up to the OBS software. I'm going to do something with this real quick though. Punch that up. Alright. So let's get back into this. Alright, let's make some neutral tone into that. So a lot of his play, I'm just kind of playing around, taking some educated guesses of what's going to work, and none of them are working right now. What is it that's not jiving here? Okay. Let's go back up into this. If something isn't working, you can take these painting rags and just wipe off stuff too. It's about as close as you're going to get to an undo button. Undo button. All right. You know what? focus on his forehead over here a bit. So let's do this. Let's take some Naples yellow and some of this, just a touch of cadmium red light, some of this yellow green, and this is, we can get a little pink. Oh, that's too much. I realize that what I'm doing here isn't really a tutorial. Like, it's almost like this is how you don't do it. So I'm just showing you kind of how I approach these things. And basically I just guess until something sticks. That's what it seems like. Which isn't always a horrible way of doing things, but maybe it's not the most efficient. I don't know. Screw it. We're gonna some of the fun is just figuring these things out. Like, I used to do really detailed drawings and spend lots of time composing the drawings, making sure the drawings were all right and everything was just so, and then transferring that drawing to a painting surface and then carefully rendering it. And I would have good results, but then I would always feel like there's something missing from that original drawing or sketch that I was basing the painting on, and I don't. It was a source of frustration that the drawing had this rawness that the painting never did. And so I just quit doing it that way. I started doing it this way. And so as you've seen, if you watch the first part of this, I didn't start out with a drawing. I just started painting on it. And the added complication of right now is that I'm trying to explain what I'm doing while I'm doing it, so I end up getting distracted. So, man, I don't know what I'm doing with this. I don't know, something's not working right here. I haven't figured it out yet. So, I'll just go a little heavy-handed into this. Do-do-do-do. Let's see. So I'm taking a Paynes gray and a burnt sienna, and I'm just going to be redefining his jawline. And I'm just painting over what's already here. Let's see here. So this is a trick I do when I'm not sure what I need to work on, is I'm getting too caught up in the face and what it looks like, and if it doesn't look like the right guy, so I'll turn it upside down. And then I'm not caught up in the face so much, and I can turn my reference upside down, which you're not going to be able to see because you're not looking at my screen. And then I look at what's the shaping is, and then it becomes easier for me to see relationships of shapes rather than it's a face. So this turns it into an abstract painting, and I can see a little more abstract, I can see the shapes better. And I can see that I have his forehead a little too small. And his jawline comes out quite a bit. So now we're just kind of redoing some of his hair here. And so a lot of times when you're trying to get a likeness, some of that comes out with the way the hairline is shape of the hairline really defines a lot. The hairline, the chin line. So let's see how that looks any better. It's already looking better. All right, I'm gonna keep doing it that way. Oops. So that put us on the right track, I think. All right, so I'm going to continue that. Let's see. Here. See. Yeah, I can see it. There we go. All right. Sometimes it's just a little thing like a new perspective that helps to bring it together. All right, so I'm going to continue with this sort of tone over here. All right, let's I have this relationship all screwed up here. All right. And his eye needs to change quite a bit. So let me think about this a bit. I'm going to turn what I have several different images here I'm working from. Okay. So I'm going to continue to try to figure out what isn't working here. So let's. So that might be too bright. Okay, I'm using a Cadmium Red Light, so it's Naples Yellow, the Portland Grays, either the medium or the light, and some raw umber. The raw umber is more of a greenish brown, which can be good mixing with the oranges because they kind of are a complementary color. Alright. Gonna let that get a little bit more grayish green as I go down. In fact, I might just push that to more of a green as I come down around his chin. I can always knock that back later if I need to. Okay, I'm gonna get a smaller brush. I'm gonna go in to his eye here. Take some of this burnt sienna, a little bit of this red, and play it like that. That's a little fatter than I want it, but that's okay because I can take another brush stroke right here and thin that up. See, I make that little point here. And I think I have it green enough, and I come to put it on there, and it's like pink. And to continue, so I'm continuing that, and then I'm going to take this same color of the flesh tone for the white of the eyes. So I'm not wanting to make them like white. That usually looks weird. So I'm going to do something like that. He's wearing glasses in this photo too, which I haven't dealt with yet. Usually I don't like painting around the glasses. I'll come in and add the glasses later. Okay, so I'm going, there's a definite, hit this Naples yellow a little bit. It's a definite line right there. As it comes up to me as an eyelid. Right there. See how that looks. That's starting, yeah, that's starting to look like his eye. And so I'm, again, working fairly loose and generalized brush strokes. What I'm working on getting is the right angles of things. And how, like, so this shape right here, there's a shape to his eyelid right there. So I'm worried about that stroke looking like the right shape. So I'm going to come down here and there's another shape like this right here. Now, part of the trick here is to not entirely be copying your reference. it's part of the reason of having several references to work from is if you can't quite figure out what's going on, you can look at another angle of the image to help you understand a little better what's happening in it. So now I'm going to come up here. There's a highlight. It's like a higher. It's not necessarily a highlight, but it's definitely brighter right there. And this helps describe it because the light is hitting his forehead right here. This is sort of to help describe some of the form a little bit better. All right. So there's sort of these green tones right next to his hairline. Like, it might be more of a raw umber. Sometimes that has a sort of a green cast to it, but not too green. You don't want it. All right. Let's see. Do this raw umber. What is this indigo blue? Start hitting right there. Okay, so I'm going to take this line, that's the yellow green, into some raw umber, and I'm going. If you can see, this brush is kind of in a dog-eared bristle on it, which is kind of a pain in my ass right now. Let's see if I can make it work anyway. Okay, I'm going to lighten that up with a little bit of this Portland gray color. All right, let's see how that is starting to come along. It's starting to look a lot more like it feels right there anyway. So like it's kind of like we have a puzzle, and this little section of the puzzle is starting to resolve itself. So going to go back up here to this tone. I'll put this brownish color into it. All right, now what are we doing? Let's go back into this section here, this eye. Just keep it on the warm side, so I add some red into that. So there's a relationship between this eye and that eye, and the shapes, how they kind of work and flow from one to the next. And that's what I'm aiming for here, is to make sure that all of these shapes, so not only the shape of this eye is correct in relationship to itself, but that it's in the right position in relationship to other parts of the face. And so eventually these things all start working together. And it becomes a little more clear about which brush strokes to make. So I start out by guessing, and then eventually it becomes more clear what to do with it. I'm going to get rid of this brush. It's not my friend right now. I don't know if this one's going to work either. I have a million brushes and they're all kind of crappy right now. Let's see. let's see if I can make this one work. I think that will do. Except it's got cat hair on it. Thanks, buddy. Okay, I'm going to take this greenish gray color, mix in with a reddish color I have over here. I know that's helpful. Greenish color, use the greenish color. Okay, I want these brush strokes to help define the form. So there's a couple. There's not only the stroke of the you know the angle and kind of stroke that you make. It's that combined with the modulation of the color. So I'm changing the color slightly, or loading up the brush to also change. So you're changing the brush angle, the angle of the brush stroke, and the value or the lightness and darkness or the saturation of the color, and those two things together help to define the overall shape and form of like his eye and his eye socket and around the structure of his cheekbone and all that kind of stuff. So the way the thing is moving in space around his eye helps to inform what kind of brushstroke should be put there, or what shape or angle or color. After you kind of pick a point, like everything has got to relate to something, so that's why I start somewhere and then I start finding it's kind of like a key or a little map that you can use to help inform you what color to mix, what color to use the next stroke, what kind of stroke to make. If you understand what the shape is doing, like if you think about it in 3 dimensions, because ultimately we're creating an illusion of 3-dimensional space in a 2-dimensional surface. So you've got a number of ways to think about doing that. So all your brush strokes and such should be describing that underlying structure and form as best you can. And the better they do that, the more sort of 3-dimensional things will appear in the painting. So, and while it's wet, you can come and change these things too. So like this is too light, so I'm going to change that. Like the stroke, the brush stroke itself is okay, but it's too hot, draws too much attention to itself. So I'm going to continue to blend that down a bit. So even though this is upside down, I know that it's an eye. And so I also know the anatomy of an eye. So I got to keep that in mind as I'm working on this, that's what's going on. This is eyelids going around this eyeball. So there's got to be a shape that is correct. And so that helps me to know what I'm looking at when I'm looking at my reference, that I'm not just copying a shape completely as abstraction, But if it doesn't work as abstraction, you're going to have a hard time. Well, I don't know what I'm saying. What do I know? So it's kind of a challenge having to talk about. Well, it's also kind of fun. Talk about what I'm doing, 'cause, you know, like I don't teach or anything, so I just this is sort of the internal dialogue that's going on in my head when I'm painting, and I am externalizing it. And the reason I don't have music going, so a lot of times I'll have music going when I'm working on stuff, but the reason I don't is because of copyright issues with YouTube streaming. And so rather than trying to, I don't really want to listen to whatever royalty-free music I can find. It's like if I can't listen to what I really want to listen to, then I'll just won't listen to anything. And it makes it a little clearer for I think the live stream. I don't have another noise going on in the background that might be too loud. Okay, let's see. Let's take another quick look at this. See if it's working. It's really, yeah, that's starting to kind of look like Walter White. And it's starting to have a sort of expression that I want too. Alright. So, alright, I'm going to move forward to another part of the painting for a bit. Starting to kind of get into a little groove here. It's really fun when you're working on a painting, and so part of it for me is the exploration, like doing the careful planning and rendering out of drawings and then transfer drawings. It just, by the time you start working on the painting, it becomes more of a chore. Like there's nothing else to figure out. And that can be, for me, it's not quite as fun. On the other hand, sometimes I like doing a study painting first. In that case, you do exactly the opposite. You figure out all the problems, like all the things that we're going through on this painting, and then when you go back to work on a new version of it, I would approach it the same way. I wouldn't necessarily, do a drawing and transfer a drawing, but because I've already figured out the composition and the color the color decisions to make, I can then just focus on brushstroke, so I have less decision making to go. So there's reasons to do it both ways, I think. But the more you work on things, the less frustrating. The more you paint, the less frustrating it gets that you can't figure something out. I don't know. Maybe it's just you develop some more patience. It also could be that you just get more confident what you're doing, and you are less likely to do things that need to be fixed, or you get better at fixing your mistakes. So I don't know. Who knows? It could be any of those things. All right. So another thing about likenesses is this the shape between the lips. So the more that is on point, and you don't have to copy it. Actually, it helps if you exaggerate these things a lot of times. This is really more of a straightforward portrait rather than a caricature portrait. But getting a likeness, if you want to start getting likenesses on portraits, it's a really good idea to start learning how to do caricature portrait drawing and painting, because the main part of that is jumping on the features that makes it look like somebody in particular. And then making it look more realistic is being able to dial back those over exaggerations so that they look a little more natural. And by that nature, for me, it means that people that have more pronounced facial features, like if they have big ears or some, like, you know, weird shaped nose or something, that makes them easier to draw and paint. That's why I find it's easier to draw and paint men generally, just probably because I am a guy and those shapes I recognize a little easier. So I have to really struggle a little bit more to make good paintings of women. But because they're difficult for me, that's why I like doing them. I like doing things that I don't think I'm very good at or that I need to improve on. Or I guess or I want to improve on. So as I go through this, I'm still doing just sort of this looking for the correct shapes, and I'm starting to find some of it here. I kind of like this brush. I wasn't sure it was going to work for this, but it seems to be doing just fine. This isn't the kind of brush you'd want to start out with. It's, first of all, I'm painting this size is small, but coming in here for some of these smaller shapes, it works pretty good. This is like some sort of round brush. So yeah, it's number 2 round. So I'm going to heat that up with some red. And then I want all of this to sort of work together a bit. So these edge relationships, you don't want everything to be hard edge, so some things blend into each other. Our eyes will figure out where, you don't have to have every edge defined in a painting. Like you don't have to have, draw lines around things for people to know that it's the nose. I hope that makes sense. So like a lot of painting is seeing what you can get away with. Like how little of something can you put into it and it makes sense. Like, how simple can you make something? Like if you can paint a nose in 3 strokes, why would you take 30? As I sit here and take 40 strokes, it kind of, But I'm having fun, so screw it. We'll worry about efficiency later. We don't have time for that crap right now. We're master painting. No, sir. Not sure it's going to work. Let's try something here. So I'm mixing some green oxide with cadmium red light and use that to start kind of blocking this mustache. I think I have the bottom of the nose too low on this. Yeah, I think so. So that might get rid of this rag. I'm going to take just to wipe that out a little bit. All right. So I want to kind of define that lip a bit. There it goes at the bottom. It knows it's going to be over here somewhere. Let's see here. I'm going to come back. So the color I'm using in this nostril is that Cadmium Red Light mixed in with some of this brownish color I had in my palette earlier. And the reason I'm doing that is because those shadows, when those shadows are really warm, there's a bit of light coming through the skin and reflecting some of the blood that would be in the skin and the flesh. It just makes that look a little more alive rather than like just some dark shadow. Yeah, this is starting to come along. All right. As I paint the entire painting upside down, telling you not to copy your reference as I copy the reference myself. Should title this, "This is how you don't make a painting. Don't do it this way." But I'm going to come in and change some things a little bit later. I want to make sure I have most of these relationships correct within the painting. Okay, so that I think is going to work better. And now I'm going to come back. I'm going to grab a Paynes gray and Aliziran crimson. That's going to give me a really dark grayish red, like that. Bring that up into here like this. All right. Grab some of that burnt sienna that I'm really liking that in flesh tones lately. Okay. So I'm going to go back to his lip here. It's got that sort of hair, like just half cocked lip right there. It dips down. I'm bringing in some Meridian Hue, which is a really dark green, kind of like phthalo or sap green, I think, but not those colors. Okay. Continue to fine around this nose a bit. Bring this green in here. So this green is kind of this. Well, it's a grayish green from I think raw umber and green oxide, and I'm mixing a little bit of this red, so it's pretty neutral grayish color. But it's also about the same value as the surrounding color, so it'll be cooler, which allows it to look like light in the shadow without changing, like that, without making it lighter. So what I'm doing is I'm changing the temperature of that color a bit, so it's a little bit cooler. I change the value of it just a little bit as well. Okay, then I'm going to come up like that. Okay, around this nose, I'm going to, there's some reflective light, and it's going to be reflected probably off of his shirt, which will be like this color, so we're going to want to, that's probably too dark. So this will be the same thing in the light, where it's not really darker than everything else, but it's a different temperature, and so when it's in the light area of the painting, it will look like shadow. So it's exactly the opposite of what we did over here. Okay, I'm going to do that, give that little light right there. Okay, I'm going to hit a little bit higher value, a little warmer to catch. Oops, too much paint on that. That highlight right there. Like that. And then the lighter is going to catch out here a little bit. So let's take a look and see what we got. And that's looking a lot more like Walter White in this scene. So let's continue to do that. Since it's working upside down, I'm just going to continue doing it this way. Alright, so I want to take that color that's in here and hit it up there a little bit. That's too light. So I've been finding, I'm sure this is obvious to most people or painters out there, but these gray tones are really what gives lifelike quality to paintings, or natural sort of color. So I've been really focusing on the gray tones and the neutrals a lot. And it helps bring everything to life really nicely. Okay, so got this warm. So I am getting some new equipment that will allow me to do my streaming from my computer that I'm using my reference on. The one I'm using now is like a really old iMac, and it's not powerful enough to do the live streaming. So anyways, that will be changing, and so you'll be able to see the same reference that I'm looking at as I continue to do these. I see a mistake. Let's knock that down right there. Oh yeah. Okay. So I'm going to punch this up a bit. Kind of liking these green tones here for the a little bit too dark. Let me find the right color for this. better. And then rolling into some of these more tones in the shadows. So we're starting to kind of get into the wrinkles on his forehead. So there's a problem that's easy to run into doing this sort of thing, is that you get caught up in the wrinkles and you lose the overall form of the forehead. So we don't want it to look like just a piece of roofing that's corrugated, like corrugated cardboard. We want the wrinkles have got to describe also the form of the overall forehead. So that is something we will be trying to pay attention to on this as well. So but it's starting to look like Walter White, and he ain't looking happy, which is to do a smiling Walter White. Nobody wants to see a smile, buddy. All right. So, kind of thinking to come in here with some of these gray tones for these wrinkles on the bright side of his forehead. But I'm not sure if that's going to work. So we don't want to get too heavy-handed with them necessarily. Might work better with a little bit of a warm tone. Let's see. Alright, maybe that works. Let's get a bigger brush. If you don't know what to do next, get a bigger brush. Might sound counterintuitive, but it keeps you from getting... So there's a tendency, at least on my part, to start like trying to fix it with adding detail. Like the detail is what's missing, and that's not what's missing. Almost never what's missing. In fact, that's probably what's making something not work, is the focus on the detail. So the way that I go about avoiding that problem is by getting a bigger brush. And I'm going to use some burnt sienna, this yellow-green color. See if that starts working. Like see this right here? That little goober? So I'm talking about if you don't get that crap off your painting, off your colors at the beginning, you end up with piles of goo that you don't want. That end up pissing you off. You get stuck in your painting, and then you got a goo painting, and nobody wants a goo painting. But maybe some people do. Okay. Gonna make this forehead a bit bigger. So I'm gonna take some of that burnt sienna, some Paynes gray. I'm gonna work up okay, it needs to be a little bit darker. So how about some Aliziran Crimson, some Brigham green hue. Maybe some more green. Let's see if that works. That looks alright. Warm that up with some cadmium red light. Often like a really warmer tone right next to the hairline helps it look like it's sitting on the head rather than just like a Lego helmet. It's like, remember the people were alive, live things. That you can never go wrong with having that warmth tone there, especially if it's sort of a natural lighting condition in the painting. Like this is sort of, the scene in this show takes place at a doctor's office next to a window, so it's got sort of the way they've set it up is that it's got some natural white balance in there, so you're going to see more warm tones in the flesh. But they've also got a color scheme in the show that sets it up the opposite. So you're going to, if you watch the show a lot, you're going to see these warm tones in the shadows like this, and these green tones in the light. It's sort of one of the stylings of the show that I particularly think is pretty nice. It sort of gives it, you know, some of the visual style. Like, all right, so let's see if this. Okay, so that's looking like Walter White to me. Let's just, for the sake of fun, keep it upside down right here. Give me 1 second. I'm just going to check my stream and make sure it's working. Appears to be working. Alright, it seems to be working. The YouTube stream is suggesting I use a smaller bit rate. So I will consider that on the next time I stream. I don't know if I want to screw up right now. Alright. So I'm going to start defining some of these shapes here. This cheek right there. There's lighter light right on top of his eyelid right there. So I'm using some of this Chromium Green oxide. It helps with some of that flesh tone where you might have stubble and different things. You can also use raw umber. That can be a good color choice for helping to define some of that too. So this thing right here is not the right spot. So I'm going to paint that out a bit. And this is a point where you start getting the flow. You can start getting a little more heavy-handed with your brush strokes. So do that. Let's see. Remember, this has got us describe the form of the forehead before you start getting worried about wrinkles. So don't get married to details. Before you have like the overall form of the thing it is that you're painting kind of figured out. Those details help describe the form and they go around with the form. It's kind of like, you know, if you're painting a wave, you don't paint the ripples in the wave before you have the wave defined. So I'm going to mix a color of Cadmium Red Light and Naples Yellow. Naples Yellow might be hard to find. You can get away with a Naples Yellow hue or something, but the main part of the Naples Yellow is it's kind of a neutral tone. It helps it grays things down without making them chalky. So I'm going to mix some Portland gray light with that. That might be too much. I don't know. We'll see. Usually that looks all right. I want to mix another thing of that color just somewhere else. Get rid of that. Yeah. So we have some without that Portland gray in it. All right. So this will help with the highlight area of his forehead. And because that cadmium red light is a really vibrant color, it looks like a light on top of this gray tone. Pretty nicely. So we can start adding in some more real flush colors in here. Also going to take that down. Actually, I want to mix in some of this green with that, see if that works. So it's all right. I'll go back to this round brush. So you can mix these neutral colors in the flesh with complementary colors. So I'm going to use this that Cadmium Red Light and Naples Yellow with some green tones, and that green will tend to gray down the red. So I have a pretty nice little highlight on his nose here. It's up high. I'm going to just hit that right there. You can change that later if need be. So I'm using that's the chromium oxide green and Naples and a cadmium red to sort of build a little. I want to keep it on the reddish side to build a tone on his nose. So another little thing to think about is to think of portrait painting as landscape painting in a sense. Like, what I mean by that is things that are closer to you tend to have darker shadows, and things that are, and they are brighter in color and so on. And as they go farther away, they get lighter and cooler. But unlike a landscape, we don't have a lot of depth in this, but you can still use some of those same principles. So the nose is closer to us in space, so some of the basic tones can be darker. That helps it to look like it's jumping forward at you. And it may not look like that in a photograph, but that's why, like I said, we don't want to copy the photo. We don't want to copy photographs. But it's something you can do if it's not looking right. You can darken that tone of something that's closer to you, and sometimes that helps it to pop out. So I'm going to continue to dilly-dally with that. Let's see, does that look correct? That's looking pretty good. All right. Now I want to come back and hit this up a little bit. Okay, I'm losing track of his wrinkles in his forehead. Okay, I'm going to work on a slip up here a little bit. I'm going to get a bit bigger of a brush. Take some of this grayish green color and kind of work that in over here. Okay, I'm going to continue to figure out what color I need over here. There we go. So there's a bit of a highlight on his bottom lip. Right about there. That might be too hot. Well, if it is, I'll come back and, well, I can tell what it is. So I want some warmth on the bottom of this lip right here. Like, and then it's getting darker over the other side of his lips. So there we go. Let's see how that. Then there's a little bit of a. So I'm playing around with these reds and greens a lot in this part of in this painting. Seems to be the key that works for this setup. So let's go back to the Indigo Blue, so Cadmium Red Light. A little bit darker for anytime I'm gonna use this deep red. A little bit of that for Sienna. And really come in here and define this a little more. All right, so there's it. Gray here. Cadmium Red Light. So I'm going to use burnt sienna for that. You can see I'm getting a lot more liberal with these brush strokes right here. I'm going to come back with this Indigo Blue, and I'm just going to use this deep red right here. All right. So yeah, just keep playing with those colors until they look good. All right, let's see how that looks. So that is looking a lot more like Walter White, in my opinion. So I'm going to attempt now to do the eyeglasses, and then I'm going to stop the stream and move on to some other stuff in the studio. All right, so I'm going to do a raw umber mix here. I'm going to thin this down so that it lays over the other colors. And I'm going to try to just draw this in a way that makes sense. So All right, so there's that. And it's best to do this kind of light. You can always go in and darken things. You can darken it up later, and you don't even have to draw the whole frame in. You can draw in places where it's obviously going to be seen, like down here. Come across there. Go right up there. There you go. And on the other side, I'm going to use a raw umber, I think. And there's places where you obviously see it. So I'm going to do it right there. I'm going to be a little bit too thick. Oh, well. And it kind of blends in with his face in certain parts. So I'm like, where they're going everywhere. It comes across there. And then there's places where it, on the shadow side of his face where it highlights. So I'm going to pull up that right there. And just like that. And kind of a little bit of a shadow edge on this side too. So then you can come in and sort of get where it's darker. We have a couple highlights there, got highlight there. You get the idea. Alright, I'm going to do a couple last things here. I'm going to hit something in his eye here to make it look good. I'm hitting this sort of dark blue into his eye just to capture the darkness. And I'm going to mix that with some raw burnt sienna. Sorry. And now I'm going to hit highlight right there, and then there's going to be another highlight on the other eye, but it's going to be much more subtle. That might not be subtle enough. I don't know. We'll see. And then there's reflected light down here. Let's see how that looks. Okay. That's looking much closer than when we started today, and I think I'm going, his glasses are, one's bigger than the other. Let's see. See if I can fix that, because that's bothering me. Yeah, okay, so this down here is not right, so I know we painted that in, looked nice, but we fucked it up. Pardon the language. So I do have to do some touch-ups right here. And you can always just, after this dries, you can repaint it and paint it out and touch up some other way too. I don't know if that's looking right. So overall, I think this turned out pretty good. I might do some more work on it before I officially call it donezo. But you got some highlights of his mouth over here. Just all kinds of little things that you can start now going in and hitting these details, because you've got everything else figured out in the painting. Yeah, what works and what doesn't. Start pushing and pulling certain things to start jumping on the emotion in the painting, of the character in the painting. So I think you get the idea. Maybe you don't. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. Who knows? So the expression, saying what you want to say, and a lot of that is going to come from doing drawings of people that aren't posing for drawings, so that you learn to start capturing expressions on people's faces in a natural way. And a lot of that is just practice. You have to learn how to not only how to see and recognize what you're looking at, but then how to translate that into marks on a piece of paper or canvas. I would suggest that one of the most important things to learn how to, if you want your painting to improve, is to work on your drawing. Probably the number one thing you can do to improve your painting is get good at drawing. So I'm just going in here with a few little hits and misses on things. There's a shadow from his glasses right there. Just stuff like that. Incorporating his glasses onto his face. Let's see this. And then how his face, how his neck fits into his shirt, etc., etc., etc. All right. I keep saying all right, then I keep saying, oh, let's do it. One more thing here. All right. I think there's some work to do on his chin and this part of his face, and just general things that need to be touched up on this. But I think I'm going to call this particular session. I got to move on to some other things here. And so this is just kind of for fun. I mean, all of it's for fun, but I don't have any other real reason for this. All right, I will catch you guys later.